Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at love, marriage, and divorce. Interesting.
Okay.
56% chance of divorce if you get married.
Wow.
And 86% of divorced people remarry within 5 years.
So that's most people.
It is.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. What is it about marriage?
Well, exactly. I mean, on the one hand, you kind of think, well, are we just setting ourselves up for failure?
Yeah, right.
But on the other hand, if so many people are jumping back in, it suggests we have this really fundamental need for partnership.
Yeah. There's something in us that needs to pair bond. It seems like marriage doesn't solve a specific problem like other technologies do. Like, we invented a hammer to hammer nails, and we invented, a refrigerator to keep things cold. What problem does marriage solve? It doesn't really seem like it solves any specific problem.
Well, he uses this really great analogy. He says, you think about everyday objects.
Right.
You know what a mug is for. You know what a chair is for.
Right.
But what is marriage for?
Yeah.
Like, why is there this assumption that everyone will get married?
Right. And even more than that, it seems like it's so deeply ingrained in our culture. Like every sitcom, every, Disney movie, every romantic comedy, like it always ends in marriage.
Yeah. Well, that leads us to his next really fascinating point, which he calls the economics of love.
Okay, so now it sounds like he is getting a little cynical.
Yeah. Is he basically saying love is a transaction?
Right.
Well, not quite.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually saying that every relationship involves an exchange of value.
Okay.
And that value can take many forms. It can be, financial resources, emotional support. It can be attractiveness, shared interest.
Yeah.
Sense of humor even.
Okay, so we're each bringing something to the table and kind of hoping that what we're bringing and what they're bringing kind of creates a good balance.
Exactly. And he says this balance, can shift over time, which can lead to problems.
Sure.
I'll give some examples.
Yeah.
Like he's seen a lot of relationships,
Yeah.
especially where there's a big age gap where it seems like wealth is a big factor.
Oh, so he's talking about like the classic gold digger scenario.
Well, he actually pushes back on that label a little bit.
Okay.
He argues that beauty is also a form of value.
Okay. Yeah.
And is often, overlooked.
Interesting.
He actually had a client who went through like the ugliest divorce he'd ever seen.
Oh, no.
And this guy remarried a much younger woman 4 months later.
Wow.
So, there's an exchange of value there.
Right.
But it's not quite as simple as just calling someone a gold digger.
Right.
It's a lot more nuanced than that.
It's interesting that he brings up age gaps. Have you noticed a lot of relationships in the news and stuff lately with significant age gaps?
I have. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you think, what is the nature of that exchange?
Right.
And I guess it's different in every couple.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like what he's getting at is that every relationship does have this interplay of giving and taking, and sometimes those contributions, maybe they become imbalanced or they become exploitative even.
Right.
Which kind of makes me think of prenuptial agreements.
Yeah.
Do those factor into this whole economics of love idea?
Oh, they absolutely do.
Yeah.
And this is where his perspective gets really fascinating.
Okay.
He sees prenups as a way to clarify expectations and provide financial security, especially if the relationship ends.
Okay. So I always thought prenups were kind of unromantic.
Yeah.
Like you're planning for it to fail, you're getting married, but you're like, let's figure out what happens when we hate each other.
Well, he actually argues that prenups can be quite romantic.
Oh.
He compares it to life insurance. You hope you never need it, but it's there to protect you and your loved ones if something goes wrong.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Being realistic, not pessimistic.
Right.
And he says that, prenups are becoming increasingly common.
Yeah, I have noticed that.
Especially among younger couples.
Yeah.
Which suggests maybe a shift in how we view marriage.
Yeah.
Like maybe acknowledging that love doesn't always conquer all.
Right.
And it's okay to, protect yourself financially.
Have you ever signed a prenup?
I have not.
Have you?
I have not.
I wonder what the most shocking prenup he's ever seen is.
Oh, he actually talks about one.
He does.
He does. He tells a story about the most shocking prenup he ever encountered, and it had a clause that the wife would lose alimony
Okay.
for every 10 pounds she gained.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
That just sounds incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
Not to mention possibly discriminatory.
Yeah, even the court called it disgusting.
Oh, wow. But it was upheld because both parties agreed to it.
I am speechless.
Ah.
What was his takeaway from that case?
He just found it to be a brutal but honest reflection of the value placed on physical appearance.
Yeah.
in that specific relationship.
Wow.
So it's like, is that even love? Like, what is the motivation there?
Right. It just really makes you think. Okay, so we've talked about prenups.
Yeah.
Which are about, setting boundaries and expectations.
Right.
But he talks about these things called fidelity clauses.
Oh.
Are those becoming more common too?
Yeah, he says he is seeing them pop up more frequently,
Okay.
but he strongly advises against them.
Why is that? You would think a fidelity clause would discourage cheating.
You would. Right.
Right. Like if there's a financial penalty.
Right.
But his argument is that defining cheating is way more complicated than it seems.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, infidelity exists on a spectrum, right?
Right. A drunken kiss at a party is very different from a long-term affair.
Exactly. And how do you even define or prove emotional infidelity?
Right. You can't really.
So it gets really, really murky.
Yeah.
And,
What counts?
Yeah, what counts? Exactly. And he also points out that men and women often react differently to infidelity.
Oh, okay.
Men tend to focus more on the physical act.
Uh-huh.
Women are more concerned with the emotional connection and the betrayal of trust.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, adding these financial penalties on top of an already emotionally devastating situation might not be the most effective or compassionate approach.
Right. It seems like he's saying it's much more important to focus on, building that strong foundation of trust and communication.
Right.
Which kind of brings us to his next point, which is what he calls preventative maintenance for relationships.
Preventative maintenance.
Yeah.
Like changing the oil in your car.
Yeah, like you change the oil in your car to keep it running smoothly.
Right. So what does that look like in a relationship?
Well, he's talking about those small everyday gestures that show your partner that you care.
Okay.
And that you appreciate them. Little things like leaving notes of appreciation, expressing gratitude, for those little things they do.
Okay.
Making an effort to really listen and connect with them.
So it's about being proactive.
Yes.
Intentional.
Yes. About nurturing the relationship instead of waiting for it to break down and then trying to fix it.
Right.
He actually encouraged all of his male friends to try this experiment. Just leave their partner a note expressing appreciation. And the response was overwhelmingly positive.
It's amazing how much those small gestures mean.
Yeah.
It's like you're making a deposit into the emotional bank account.
Exactly.
In the relationship.
And those deposits add up over time. He also really stresses the importance of open and honest communication. Yeah. Especially when it comes to, addressing issues as they arise. And this is where he introduces this technique he calls hit send now.
Hit send now.
Yeah. What's that all about?
I don't know. What is that all about?
So it's basically if something is bothering you, write it down, get it all out, be honest about it, and hit send. Don't overthink it.
No agonizing over the wording.
No, just hit send now.
Okay.
It's about getting those feelings out in the open before they fester.
Okay. But wouldn't that lead to a lot more arguments?
Not necessarily. The key is to agree beforehand.
Okay.
That you'll hear each other with love and understanding, even if the message is tough.
Okay.
So it's about being vulnerable and honest, but also respectful and compassionate.
Okay.
And he says that this technique can be applied to all sorts of issues, big or small.
No.
It's really about fostering a culture of open communication.
Yeah.
Which he thinks is essential for long-term happiness and stability.
We've talked a lot about the emotional and financial aspects of relationships.
Yeah.
But what about the physical side?
Right.
How does that factor into his view of marriage and divorce?
That is a great question, and it's one that he does not shy away from.
Okay.
He's very clear in saying that sex is a key difference between a spouse and a roommate.
He's not wrong.
No, he is not.
But how often does that actually come up in his work with divorcing couples?
He says it comes up more frequently than you might think.
Really?
Yeah. And it's not always just about infidelity. He says he's noticed that changes in sexual frequency or satisfaction can actually be a warning sign. Okay. That there are some deeper problems brewing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a barometer for the overall health of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
He thinks couples should be really proactive about addressing those changes in their sexual dynamic rather than letting it become this source of tension.
Makes sense.
He also has this really great saying, empty barrels make the most noise.
I like that. What is he getting at there?
He says that he has noticed that the people who are loudest about their happiness are often the least happy.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to convince themselves and everyone else that everything's perfect when underneath it all.
Right.
There might be a lot of insecurity and dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
It's all for show. It's all a front.
So it's about recognizing that social media often presents this distorted view of reality.
Right.
And comparing ourselves to these kind of idealized, often fake portrayals can lead to a lot of, unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
And self-doubt.
He also connects that to this idea that true wealth often whispers.
What does that mean?
He says he has observed that people who are genuinely happy and financially secure don't feel the need to flaunt it. They're content with their lives. They don't need that external validation. And he contrasts that with people who are deeply in debt but projecting this image of affluence.
Right. Especially on social media.
Especially on social media.
You've seen that firsthand, I'm sure.
We have.
With clients.
Especially some of his celebrity clients who live these very lavish lifestyles but are actually drowning in debt.
Wow.
It's a good reminder that what we see on the surface isn't always the whole story.
So it's about being authentic, both in how we present ourselves to the world and how we communicate within our relationships.
Absolutely. And speaking of authenticity, he makes this really interesting observation about the impact of job loss on marriage.
Okay, I'm curious to hear this. Does he think that financial stress is kind of a major factor in divorce?
He definitely sees a correlation, but it goes beyond just the practical challenges of having less income. He's observed that men in particular seem to struggle when they lose their jobs, and their wives become the breadwinners.
So there's a deeper layer there.
Exactly. He thinks it's tied to traditional gender roles and kind of the symbolic meaning of money. Men often derive a sense of identity and self-worth from being the provider and the protector. When that role is threatened, it can trigger this crisis of confidence and feelings of inadequacy.
It's like it challenges their masculinity.
Right.
And their place in the relationship, even if those roles are, outdated or evolving.
He's not saying he's anti-feminist.
Right.
Or that women shouldn't be successful.
Right.
It's just an observation about how those shifts in dynamics can create tension if they're not addressed.
So it's important for couples to communicate openly about finances.
Yeah.
And, be willing to adapt to those changing circumstances.
And speaking of communication, he has some really interesting thoughts about transparency when it comes to money and relationships.
Okay. So are we talking like full disclosure? Tell your partner exactly how much you're earning, even if it's, significantly more or less.
Well, legally speaking, in a divorce, full financial disclosure is required.
Right.
But from a relationship standpoint, he thinks honesty and transparency are key.
Okay.
Hiding income or assets can really breed distrust and resentment.
Right. It creates this imbalance of power.
Exactly.
And it's hard to make financial decisions as a team.
Right. He's seen situations where one partner had no clue about the extent of the other's wealth.
Really?
Like he had a client who won the lottery.
Oh, wow.
And was shocked to find out that his wife, who he was already unhappy with, was entitled to half the winnings.
Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Complicated the divorce proceedings a little bit.
I bet.
But it highlights the importance of being upfront about finances throughout the relationship, not just when it's ending.
So honesty is the best policy.
Pretty much.
Even when it comes to money.
Yes. What other financial advice does he give?
Well, he emphasizes understanding debt.
Okay.
And how that impacts your overall financial picture as a couple.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up, in keeping up appearances, especially in today's culture with social media.
Everyone looks perfect online.
Right. And everyone seems to be living this perfect life.
Yeah. He reminds us that a lot of those perfect lives are fueled by debt.
Oh, yeah.
And living beyond your means can lead to disaster, both financially and relationally.
So it's about being honest.
Yes.
About your financial situation and making responsible decisions together as a couple.
Absolutely.
He's also seen a lot of people trying to hide money during a divorce.
Oh, I bet.
I'm sure he's got some stories.
Oh, yeah.
Transferring assets to family members.
Underreporting income.
All of that.
All of it.
But he says that courts are becoming increasingly sophisticated at detecting these tactics.
Okay.
So he stresses that honesty and transparency are always the best approach, both legally and ethically. It's about moving forward with integrity and creating a solid financial future for yourself, even as you navigate the complexities of, ending a marriage.
Yeah. It seems like he views divorce as not just a legal process, but as an opportunity for personal growth.
Right.
like a chance to rebuild and kind of reassess your life.
Now, he sees parallels between the challenges faced by, both heterosexual and LGBTQ couples, but he acknowledges some unique aspects of the LGBTQ experience.
Yeah, can you talk about that a bit?
Sure.
I'm interested in hearing his perspective on that.
So, he believes that, LGBTQ couples, having often faced, societal marginalization, have kind of had to create their own relationship models, often outside of traditional norms.
Yeah, so they've been more intentional and less reliant on societal scripts
Exactly.
about how relationships are supposed to be.
He told a story about a gay friend who wasn't that excited about same-sex marriage being legalized.
Oh, interesting. Why not? I would think everyone was pretty excited about that.
Well, his friend kind of joked that it took away his government excuse for not getting married.
Oh, so now he actually had to have that conversation.
Right. Like now he had to make a decision and, think about whether he really wanted to do it or not.
So interesting how external factors can influence those big decisions.
Right.
And it kind of speaks to how, LGBTQ couples are really redefining what marriage and family can look like.
Right. Speaking of, redefining relationships,
Yeah.
he touched on the topic of open relationships and ethical non-monogamy.
Okay. So what are his thoughts on that?
Well, he admitted that most of his experience with open relationships comes from couples who have, tried it and ended up getting a divorce.
Okay. That makes sense. So he's got kind of a skewed perspective.
Right. It's like asking a heart surgeon about the success rate of heart transplants.
Right.
They're mostly going to be seeing the complicated cases.
Yeah. As long as it didn't work out.
But he did acknowledge that, societal attitudes towards monogamy are changing and that some couples might genuinely, find fulfillment in alternative models.
Yeah.
He actually mentioned Esther Perel,
Oh, yeah.
who's written extensively about modern relationships, including infidelity and the challenges of maintaining desire over time.
Yeah.
He thinks that a lot of couples are already engaging in some form of non-monogamy, whether they're acknowledging it or not.
Okay.
It's about being honest
Yeah.
with ourselves and our partners about what our needs and desires are, and then figuring out how to navigate those complexities ethically and responsibly.
Right. He stresses that open relationships require a lot of communication and honesty and trust.
Yeah, even more so than traditional monogamous relationships, probably.
Probably right.
I mean, you really have to be on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This lawyer is so refreshing. He's not afraid to tackle these really difficult topics and challenge conventional thinking about relationships. And despite seeing all this divorce and all these breakups, he still seems to believe in love.
Yeah, he really does. He sees it as this force for good in the world, even when it's messy and complicated.
Yeah. And he's a real advocate for personal growth and self-awareness,
Yeah.
both within relationships and, outside of them.
And he reminds us that, the end of a relationship, whether it's through divorce or death, doesn't have to diminish the love that was shared.
Right. It can be painful, but it can also be an opportunity for growth.
Right.
A chance to create a new chapter in your life. He believes we have this infinite capacity for love and that our hearts can, break and heal and break again. And each time we emerge a little stronger,
Yeah.
a little wiser,
Yeah.
and a little more open to the beauty and the complexity of human connection.
What a great message of hope
Yeah.
and resilience. I think we're going to wrap it up there for part 1. When we come back, we'll continue exploring this lawyer's insights into this ever-evolving world of human relationships.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of marriage and divorce.
We're picking up where we left off with our very insightful divorce lawyer,
Yeah.
who, despite seeing the end of so many relationships,
Right.
still had a lot of really interesting things to say about the concept of soulmates.
Okay, so is he a believer?
Right. Is there such a thing as the one?
I mean, you wouldn't think so if he spends his days dealing with all these divorce cases.
Yeah, you would think he would be pretty jaded.
Right.
But he actually expresses some skepticism
Okay.
about the idea that there is just one right person for each of us.
I can see that making sense.
Yeah.
If everyone is with their soulmate, then why are divorce rates so high?
Exactly.
Why are so many people unhappy?
He thinks that this soulmate concept can actually be detrimental to relationships.
Okay. I'm curious how. So, because I always thought of it as a romantic ideal.
Yeah. I mean, it is romantic, but he thinks it sets up these unrealistic expectations.
Okay.
Like it suggests we need to find someone who is absolutely perfect for us in every way.
Which is impossible.
Which is impossible, right?
No one's perfect, and relationships always involve compromise and, navigating those differences.
Exactly. He even compares it to having children.
Okay.
Like, no one says, well, I love my first child so much I could never love another one as much, so I'm not having any more.
Right.
We have this capacity for love.
Yeah.
It's not this finite thing that gets used up.
Right. So if it's not about finding the one,
Right.
how does he suggest we approach relationships then?
He proposes thinking of relationships more like chapters in a book. Each one, whether it lasts, a few months or a lifetime, teaches us something valuable about ourselves, about love, about what we want and need in a partner.
I really like that analogy.
Yeah.
Because it takes the pressure off finding the one.
Exactly.
And allows for growth and evolution over time.
Right, exactly. Just because a chapter ends doesn't mean the entire book is a failure.
Right.
Each relationship can be a meaningful experience, even if it doesn't last forever.
And this ties into what he was saying earlier about how, our needs and desires change as we age.
Right.
What we might find attractive and compelling in our 20s might be completely different from what we're looking for in our 50s or 60s.
Yeah, he actually uses this funny analogy.
Oh, I love his analogies.
They are good, right? He talks about how a 20-year-old might dream of owning a Lamborghini.
Okay, a classic symbol of youth and extravagance.
Right, but as we get older, our priorities change.
Right.
Try fitting a car seat in a Lamborghini.
Not very practical.
Or hauling groceries home from the supermarket.
No, our needs change. And so do our relationship requirements.
Exactly. And he also kind of challenges this romantic notion that couples automatically grow together just because they're in close proximity.
Proximity doesn't guarantee compatibility or shared growth.
Right. He encourages us to be more intentional about personal growth within relationships.
Okay.
And to recognize that it takes effort, communication, a willingness to, adapt and evolve together.
But, sometimes, despite our best efforts, relationships just run their course.
Yeah, that happens.
I mean, he's seen all the marriages that have lasted decades.
Right?
To ones that have crumbled after mere days.
Oh, yeah. He even mentioned a couple who divorced after just 48 hours.
Wow. There's a whirlwind romance gone wrong.
Yeah.
What happened there?
He didn't go into detail, but he said that, those super short marriages are more likely to be annulments than traditional divorces.
Right.
It's those longer relationships, the ones where people have built lives and families together, that tend to be the most complex and emotionally charged.
And like we talked about earlier, financial issues can play a huge role in those really complicated divorces.
He's very interested in the psychology of money and how it impacts relationships.
Yeah.
He finds it fascinating how money often becomes symbolic of power and control.
Right. It can definitely, impact how we view ourselves, our partners, our roles within the relationship.
He brought up an observation that I thought was really interesting.
Right.
He's noticed that men in particular seem to struggle when they lose their jobs.
Okay.
And their wives become the primary breadwinners.
I've heard of this. I'd be interested to hear his take.
He thinks it triggers these feelings of inadequacy and a sense of failure to fulfill that traditional role of provider.
So it challenges their masculinity and their place in the relationship, even if those roles are outdated or evolving?
He's not advocating for those traditional gender roles, but he's just acknowledging that those shifts in dynamics can create tension if they're not openly addressed.
So it's crucial for couples to communicate openly about finances and be willing to adapt to those changing circumstances.
And speaking of communication, he has some interesting thoughts about transparency when it comes to money and relationships.
So, should we be telling our partners exactly how much we earn, even if it's significantly more or less than them?
Well, legally, in a divorce, full financial disclosure is required.
Right.
But from a relationship standpoint, he believes that honesty and transparency are crucial.
Okay.
Hiding income or assets can breed distrust and resentment.
Right. It creates that imbalance of power, and it makes it difficult to make financial decisions as a team.
Exactly. He's seen situations where one partner had absolutely no idea about the extent of the other partner's wealth.
Wow.
Like he had a client who won the lottery.
Oh, wow.
And was shocked to find out that his wife, whom he was already unhappy with, was entitled to half of his winnings.
Oh, that's got to sting a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely complicated the divorce proceedings. But it highlights the importance of being open about finances throughout a relationship.
Right.
Not just when it's ending.
Honesty is the best policy.
Pretty much.
Even when it comes to money.
Yes. What other advice does he give?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of understanding debt.
Okay.
And how it impacts, your overall financial picture as a couple.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in keeping up with appearances, especially in today's social media culture.
Right, where everyone seems to be living this perfect life.
Right. And he reminds us that a lot of those perfect lives are fueled by debt.
Oh, yeah.
And living beyond your means can lead to disaster,
Right.
both financially and relationally.
So it's about being honest
Yes.
about your financial situation
Yeah.
and making responsible decisions together as a couple.
He's also seen countless examples of people trying to hide money during a divorce.
Oh, I bet he has some stories.
I'm sure he does.
Transferring assets to family members, underreporting income.
All of it. But he emphasizes that courts are becoming more sophisticated at detecting these tactics.
Okay.
So honesty and transparency are always the best approach, legally and ethically.
Right. It's about moving forward with integrity and creating, a solid financial future for yourself, even as you navigate the complexities of ending a marriage.
It seems like he views divorce not just as a legal process, but as an opportunity for personal growth.
Right.
And a chance to rebuild.
Now, we've talked about, finances a lot in the last little bit.
Yeah.
But he sees a lot of parallels between the challenges faced by both heterosexual and LGBTQ couples.
Right.
But he also acknowledges some unique aspects of the LGBTQ experience.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
I'm curious to hear his perspective.
So he believes that LGBTQ couples, having often faced societal marginalization,
Mm-hmm.
have kind of had to create their own relationship models, often outside of traditional norms.
Yeah, they've had to be more intentional and less reliant on these societal scripts for how relationships should be. And he sees a certain freedom and creativity in their approach to love and commitment.
Yeah.
He told this story about a gay friend who wasn't that excited about the legalization of same-sex marriage.
Oh, really? Why not? I thought everyone would be celebrating.
Well, his friend joked that it took away his government excuse for not getting married. So now he had to have those serious conversations about commitment.
Interesting how these external factors can influence, our decisions about relationships.
Absolutely. And it speaks to how LGBTQ couples are redefining what marriage and family can look like.
Right. Speaking of redefining relationships, he also touched on the topic of open relationships.
Yeah.
And ethical non-monogamy.
What are his thoughts on those?
Well, he admitted that most of his experience with open relationships comes from couples who, tried it and ended up getting a divorce.
Okay, so he's kind of got a skewed perspective.
Right. It's like asking a heart surgeon about the success rate of heart transplants.
Right, they mostly see the ones that don't work out.
Right. They're seeing the complicated cases.
But he acknowledged that societal attitudes towards monogamy are changing.
Right.
And that, some couples might genuinely find fulfillment in these alternative relationship models.
He even mentioned Esther Perel,
Oh, yeah.
who's written a lot about modern relationships, infidelity, and the challenges of maintaining desire over time.
Yeah.
And he believes that a lot of couples are already engaging in some form of non-monogamy,
Okay.
whether they're acknowledging it or not.
It's about being honest with ourselves and our partners about our needs and our desires.
Right.
And then figuring out how to navigate those complexities, ethically and responsibly.
He stresses that open relationships require a lot of communication,
Yeah.
honesty, and trust.
Probably even more so than traditional monogamous relationship.
Probably.
I mean, you really have to be on top of it.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me that this lawyer,
Right.
who deals with all this heartbreak and divorce and all these, legal battles, he still seems to have this really positive outlook on relationships.
He's not jaded. He's not cynical.
He's not at all.
He really seems to believe in love.
He does, and he sees it as a force for good in the world, even when it's messy and complicated.
He's also a big advocate for, personal growth
Right.
and self-awareness, both within relationships and outside of them.
Right.
And he reminds us that, the end of a relationship, whether it's through divorce or death, doesn't have to diminish the love that was shared.
Right. It can be a painful experience, but it can also be an opportunity for growth
Uh-huh.
and a chance to create a new chapter in our lives.
And he really believes we have this infinite capacity for love,
Right.
and that our hearts can, break and heal and break again. And each time we emerge a little stronger, a little wiser,
Yeah.
and a little more open to the beauty and the messiness of human connection.
What a powerful message of hope and resilience.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we're going to end part 2 here. And when we come back, we'll wrap up our exploration of marriage, divorce, and the enduring power of love.
Welcome back to our deep dive. I have to say, after talking to this divorce lawyer, I'm feeling surprisingly optimistic about love.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
You'd think he'd be jaded,
Totally.
but he's not.
He's not.
He really does seem to believe in love.
Yeah. Even after seeing, the worst of the worst. He even had me tearing up a little when he told that story about his dad and the pizza.
Oh, yeah.
So sweet.
Yeah.
Such a simple gesture.
It really highlighted his point that love doesn't have to be this big grand thing.
Right.
It can be those little quiet acts of kindness.
Right. It made me think about all the little ways we show love to people without even realizing it.
Yeah, and he's a big believer in preventative maintenance in relationships.
Yeah.
You know, those little things we do to kind of nurture the connection and keep the spark alive.
Right, because it's so easy to just let things slide.
Yeah, especially when life gets busy.
Right. But he reminds us that relationships are like anything valuable, you've got to take care of them.
Right. He made a comparison to how we treat our aging dogs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we don't stop loving them when they get older and they can't run as fast anymore.
Right.
If anything, we cherish them even more.
Yeah.
We know that, time is precious.
I love that. Why not extend that to our human relationships as well?
Exactly.
Why wait till things are falling apart?
Right. Why not appreciate what we have?
He encourages us to kind of view love as this gift that's loaned to us, not permanently bestowed.
Okay.
So it's a reminder to really be present,
Mm-hmm.
Savor the good times and to kind of navigate challenges with grace and understanding.
He also believes that love is always worth it.
Yeah, even with the risk of heartbreak.
Yeah.
It takes courage
Uh-huh.
to open yourself up to that, knowing that pain and disappointment, that's part of it.
He actually said, it's terrifying to know this thing is going to break my heart, but I'm going to let it. I'm going to let it break my heart because the joy it's going to give me in the interim, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Wow.
I know.
That's beautiful.
It really is.
So honest, too.
Yeah. And it acknowledges those risks, but it also affirms how much love is worth it.
Exactly. And even when relationships end, whether through divorce or death, it doesn't, discount the love that was there. It just becomes part of our story.
Yeah.
A chapter that shapes who we are.
And sometimes those endings, as painful as they can be, open us up to new beginnings.
Right.
Even deeper connections.
He's got this belief that we have an infinite capacity for love.
Yeah.
Our hearts break, they heal, and they break again. Each time we come out stronger, wiser, and a little more open to, all the beauty and the messiness of human connection.
I love that. So realistic, but also hopeful.
Right. It's not sugarcoating anything.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, let's just, take with us the wisdom that we've gotten from this divorce lawyer.
Yeah.
Let's be present, in our relationships. Cherish the love we have and embrace the journey.
With all of its ups and downs.
And if love is an economy, as he suggests,
right.
Let's think about what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah. Are we showing up with honesty and integrity and, an open heart? These are questions worth asking, not just in our romantic relationships,
right,
but in all of our relationships.
This has been such an incredible journey, and I'm so glad you joined us.
Yeah, this was a good one.
It was.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep believing in the power of love. Even a divorce lawyer does. We'll see you on the next deep dive.